Do you ever feel like your houseplants are taking over your life? You're not alone. Let's have a chat about plant burnout, what you can maybe do to avoid it, or not. But essentially, how do you find some happiness and peace? Hi, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. Today's topic is a bit more of a heavier topic, but I know that this is a conversation that we've all been having in a lot of my videos, chats. There's a lot of other people that are having similar conversations across the internet, and it is the topic of burnout, specifically plant burnout. And you might hear this in the same breath as people saying plant purges or getting rid of some of their plants, or all of their plants for that matter. But what is plant burnout? Let's start there. What is plant burnout? In its most kind of crystalline, kind of basic form, it's that feeling of being overwhelmed by having to deal with essentially a jungle that you've created of your own accord. I think most of us are aware of this, but it is having to deal with all of this. So obviously, not everybody's collections might be the same as mine, or as large as mine, or even as small as mine, depending on where you are and where you benchmark things. But plant burnout is a real thing, and it just means that feeling of feeling overwhelmed from having to care, having to water, having to repot, having to deal with pests, having to do all of these things all of the times for as many plants as is your own threshold. And that's an important thing here, because everybody's threshold isn't going to be the same. Some people might be getting plant burnout at 5 plants, 10 plants, 20 plants. Other people might only be getting plant burnout at 1,000 plants. So it just depends on where you are and what's causing the burnout. Some external factors away from the plants could also be causing the issue. So let's dive into it a bit more. Before I dive into what the signs might be of burnout, one final thing that I want to say for that first section is that this could happen to anybody. It could happen to beginners, it can happen to people that have been doing this for years. It doesn't discriminate in that respect. So do not feel bad if you've only just started dealing with houseplants and all of a sudden you're dealing with burnout. Same thing that you shouldn't feel bad if you've been doing this for years and you're now getting burnout. It can happen at any stage. But let's have a look at maybe some of the signs of burnout. One thing I've kind of mentioned briefly before is just that feeling of being overwhelmed by the day-to-day caring for your plants. And this generally for most people, if it's day-to-day, you're looking predominantly at watering all of your plants. Another symptom could be ignoring or resenting your plants altogether. Having to care for them even being in your space. That is usually one of the first red flags that you really should be starting to pay attention, going, I should be enjoying this. This is something that I started doing either because I thought I was going to be enjoying it, or I started doing it because I was enjoying it. Why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling now? This also leads to another symptom which is kind of tightly linked to this, which is plants suffering because of the burnout as well. So some plants might be going underwatered for a very long period of time because you just cannot bring yourself to deal with the plants. And not just watering, it could be like a pest infestation, it could be any of these things. The fact that you're not caring with them is going to start showing up on your plants, because ultimately, and this is part of another reason why people might feel burnout, that pressure, is that these things are living beings, essentially, living things, where because they're in pots, because they're in a house, they're not out in nature, they do not have all the things that they would normally get, you are solely responsible for their care and their well-being. So if you have got something wrong with you, they're going to have something wrong with them. And this kind of links into, I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is part of the reason where on flights, if anybody actually pays attention to the safety warnings in the beginning, where I think they still say this, or at least it's in the little booklets, it always tells parents, if the oxygen mask drops, put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you do that to your child. Because guess what's going to happen? If you are suffering, your child, you cannot help your child if you, the caregiver, is suffering. Does that make sense? So it's the same thing. Like, you need to put your oxygen mask on first, but until you do that, these things will suffer, basically. And one of the big, heavy ones when it comes to plant burnout is guilt over not taking care of your plants. So feeling that level of kind of overwhelming guilt about, I should be doing this, I cannot physically bring myself to do this. I'm not talking like that it's a form of depression, but it's gonna have some similar kind of, not symptoms, but similar traits with this one, where it's just like, I feel like I should be doing this, and the more I don't do it, the more I feel guilty, and the more I feel guilty, I should be doing it. Do you see how it ends up becoming a catch-22 there? Hopefully I've mentioned this at the beginning of the video. This is going to be a heavy video, so if I didn't say it at the beginning, I'll probably put like a written warning at the very beginning, just to kind of be aware, because not everybody's going to be in the right mindset to watch this video. Some people might take comfort from it, which is what I'm hoping, but I'm also hoping that the broader kind of community pays attention to these kinds of videos so that maybe they don't let it get to that level. But why does plant burnout happen? What things lead to this feeling of feeling burnt out, to kind of feeling overwhelmed? One of the really obvious things, and I think I touched on this on a video that I did about the kind of realities of having bigger collections and things I wish I knew when I was first starting off, which is buying plants, and buying plants in huge numbers and really, really fast. That kind of notion that we've all discussed in the comments of that video, and I'll link it somewhere at the top. The fact that you kind of go from 1 plant to 100 plants in 0 time flat, that can come with its own sense of overwhelm and burnout. And I'm going to be quite honest, when I was first starting off, I went through that same journey, and I did have a form of burnout where I'm just like, what have I done? What have I done? And there's a lot of people, this is what I'm saying, it doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if somebody who's been doing it for a while, because this is something that maybe a beginner might be experiencing, because they're just like, oh no, why so many plants, and now I need to care for all of these, and then all of the symptoms that I was talking about start happening. This could have happened, and I think hopefully this, again, if you've been doing this for a while and you're not experiencing burnout, but you experience something similar like this in the beginning, let people know down below, if for no other reason, to make them see that it's kind of something that you could work through, you have worked through, I've worked through myself, and we can all kind of join in our kind of same lived experiences, if that makes sense. So yes, I had similar situations. I'm just like, I had all of this time before I got all of these plants, but now I need to take care of all of these plants. I don't have the time. And I then made a decision to say, you know what, this is definitely a hobby that I'm really interested in. It kind of tested my mettle, if that makes sense, that kind of initial stage of burnout, and just went, that was a turning point. I'm just like, I could stay on the course, but this is the things that I'm maybe going to be sacrificing some extra time, some of my mornings and all these things, sacrificing. Or do I get out now? This is a time where I need to get out. Many years later, I am still here. I still enjoy this. And what I thought I was sacrificing in terms of time, for me at least, and this is how I push through it, I've ended up enjoying it. Slight bit of Stockholm syndrome there. But no, it's one of those things that I can't think of starting my day. And when I go on holiday, for instance, and I'm not near my plants, I not have withdrawals, but I kind of miss my morning routine. I'm a Taurus, so I like a good routine. But I miss that kind of waking up, making myself a coffee, coming in here, putting an audiobook in, and just disappearing from the world for like an hour or 2 hours of watering, and it's my me time. And before I would have been like, oh, this is me sacrificing time. Now it's me like, oh, this is something I enjoy doing, and I look forward to doing this habit every day. and it doesn't become overwhelming. This is another big one, and I know this is rich coming from me. God, the fact that I'm going to say this, the words that are going to come out of my mouth now. Feeling like you have to stay kind of up to date with all the things that the plant-fluencers are saying. I'm not a plant-fluencer. I'm a weird person that talks about plants on the internet. It's fine. No. But I get this because there's a lot of people that will spend a lot of time and money getting some of these plants that all of us maybe that do have like YouTube channels, Instagram channels that talk about, and that's never been our intention, is to put any more stress on people. And a lot of the times there's plants that I can talk about myself, I can't talk about anybody else, but I tend to get plants that I like. I don't tend to get plants because other people like those plants. Granted, there's a couple of plants, and I can talk from experience with this one. I wanted the Monstera obliqua because everybody wanted the Monstera obliqua and nobody could get the Monstera obliqua. That was something that I was influenced in. And the reality was, and I've talked about this on kind of a few videos, after getting the plant, I was overwhelmed, underwhelmed, or whelmed, to say the least. So take the influencing with a pinch of salt, to be fair. But it is those things where it kind of links into that notion of keeping up with the Joneses. It's a tale as old as time. But maybe something that, if you're starting to feel overwhelmed and burnout, maybe start stepping away from that. And I know this is not going to be good for anybody like myself who's got channels like this, because we're going to end up losing viewers. But ultimately, I and a lot of us care about the community, basically, more than views necessarily. If it means stepping away from your favorite kind of Instagrammers, YouTubers, all these things for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, a year, or forever, for your own sanity and peace of mind, do it. Do it if it helps you. The other big one is not having a realistic plant care routine. And again, something that I touched on that video about the realities of having a large collection versus what I thought I knew when I had a smaller collection. There's certain things that you will drive yourself mad. You will drive yourself mad. I talked about this, and just like, you will not have perfect leaves on every single one of your plants when you've got 400 plants. You'll be lucky if you've got a couple of plants that don't look quite as busted as the rest of them. Does that make sense? So it's kind of adjusting your expectations of yourself and of your plants to help not get to that level there, basically. And again, this dovetails into plant-fluencers and what you might see online. I have said this as well as everybody else have said this online, specifically things like Instagram and things like that. I try to keep it real on my channel, at least here. Hello, look at some busted looking leaves. What's and all. But what you see a lot of the times is a highly manicured version of whoever is posting it wants you to see. It's that kind of notion of, for example, somebody decides to take a photo of you and they say, right, take a pose, say cheese. Most people's brains at that point would be like, oh, do I look good? Does my hair look good? Do I need to smile? Do I need to be standing on this? Do I look fat in this? Do I need to suck in my stomach? To see what I mean? People, they're not doing this with bad intention. It's kind of inbuilt to us to try to project our best self out there, and it's easier to do that because you feel you won't get judged. It takes, I don't want to say courage, I'm not that courageous, but like, or anybody else who shows this, but it takes a lot more to kind of go, this is it, warts and all, judge away, and you'd be surprised most people won't. But everything, so your care routine needs to be something that works for you. Another example of like a care routine that might be difficult to maintain, you love ferns or plants that need very frequent watering, and then you realize, oh no, summer's here, how am I going to like water this many things? Adjusting at that point. Maybe even if you love the ferns and even if you can keep them happy, maybe you don't need 500 ferns. Maybe you can just deal with having 10 to 20, 5, 6, or however many makes it manageable so you don't have to do quite as much. And the other big one, I couldn't not mention this, is big life changes. And I've talked to so many of you that have felt guilty about kind of letting go of your plants or reducing the plants, or half of your plants are dying because of things that you a lot of the times have no control over that happen in your life. So somebody passing away and you need to deal with the grief of that. The last thing for a lot of people, some people find peace in dealing with this, and this is a good way for them to deal and that calmness of mind, but not for everybody. This might become overwhelming for people if they're dealing with grief. Starting a new job, there's a lot of things that happen, and this might all need to come second place in favor of that job, because at the end of the day, without that job, you cannot feed yourself and you cannot afford all the things that you need in order to keep all of these things happy. So that needs to come first. Same thing with a new baby. There's so many different things that could happen in your life that will make you basically take your eye off the ball with this. And for a lot of people, the notion of coming back to that, or even the notion that that is happening whilst it's happening, could lead to burnout as well. Now let's talk about some solutions and preventions that you could do. The first big one, and again, it's not something that's entirely new. I'm not kind of reinventing the wheel here. This is something that people have been doing for a while. Most of these things are going to be things that have been doing for a while, because people naturally, at least I think, can find ways to restore balance in their own life, and that's what we see. And it's quite interesting to see that a lot of people do the same things to restore balance in their lives. So the first thing is going to be the obvious one: declutter. I know, I'm going to hold your hand whilst I tell you this, but it might be time for you to get rid of some of your plants, maybe all of your plants, depending on where you are and how much of a burnout it is. Because at the end of the day, keeping some of the plants that really do bring you joy might smell dense. And maybe getting rid of some of the plants that don't bring you joy. And you can have mini burnouts at different stages as well. And this is what I was talking about before. Like sometimes the summer is a bit of a burnout season for a lot of us, where it's just like, this is too much. The reality is around the summertime is when a lot of plants end up to the compost gods, or are traded with people, or are gifted to friends. And that's a good way, if you're feeling guilty about going, oh, I kind of signed a mental contract with this plant that I was going to take care of it for its entirety of its life, and I feel like I'm giving up. You're not. You are giving it a different life, basically. You are gifting it to somebody, all of these things. Or do what I do in the summer with some of these plants, where I'm just like, you can summer outside, knowing full well that that plant is not coming back in the winter. It is having its last few months in the sun, quite literally and figuratively there. And you'd be surprised how many of those plants actually survived, and I actually now live year long in my greenhouse outside, which is unheated in the UK. But yeah, decluttering is first an easy step, I think, for a lot of people to kind of start managing that kind of issue of burnout. The next one is adjusting your care routine. I touched on this briefly, but other things that you could do is go for plants that need less affection, basically, or less kind of care. Your ZZs, your Sansevierias, and I know for a lot of people they're just like, they're not as interesting. I beg to differ. You can find some interesting cultivars of a lot of these different, like there's a whole host of, and I'm not saying that any of these are going to necessarily be as easy as the base model, so to speak, but you could find kind of some interesting Sansevierias, some interesting ZZs. Do you see what I mean? The same with the pothos plant. There are plants that, if you are getting rid of plants, but you still want to have some plants, you could do it that way and just get easier plants. Maybe don't get 500 calatheas. I'm just saying. I know a lot of you do love to grow calatheas, and you do quite well, which is, by the way, I'm really impressed. Me and a whole bunch of other people are very impressed that you're keeping your calatheas happy. Power to you. But for the people that are maybe having burnout, that could be a culprit plant. So you don't need 200 calatheas. Maybe one or two, it's fine. See how you cope with that, and then maybe start adding later, but it becomes a bit more manageable. So changing your care routine. One of the things that I found really useful, and I think I've done a video on this specific product, was an automatic waterer, which I'm using for all of my mounted orchids. They're on the side there, basically. So I don't have to bring every single one of them down and soak them in water every 2 days. That does it for me. It takes water out of a bucket, and I just need to remember to fill up that bucket every 2 days. Easy, 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 easy. Same thing goes for things like pest management. There is a reason why a lot of the times you'll see me and a whole bunch of other people, and I'll bring you up one so you can see it. I need to replace these actually for the season. Predatory insect satchels, because it takes off a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to dealing with pests. That could be something that you could do to adjust your care so you don't feel that overwhelm. Because if you've got 400, 500, 600 plants, even less than that actually, and you know that on top of everything else, you need to spray everything down every couple of weeks with like kind of pest management solution. It might be neem, it might be kind of natural, it might be chemical, and all these things. That could still add a lot of like, I don't want to do it. The next thing that you could do is setting boundaries, and this is an obvious one that a lot of people do, the kind of one in or one out. So it essentially is what you think it is. So if I'm going to get a new plant, because I don't want to grow my collection, I've got it to a level where it's manageable for me, I'll be like, okay, I really want this plant. Which plant from my collection am I going to gift to somebody? Or not necessarily trade, because you're getting more plants then. But you need to be honest with yourself. Don't go one in, one out and just buy a new plant and then trade the plant that you've got, and then you've got another one coming back in, because you haven't got, the one out hasn't gone out. It's still come back in. Different form, but it's still come back in. I know, and I know you know. Don't kid yourself. But yeah, one in, one out can, and it does help a lot of people. I find that that is quite good. And then the fourth one, which might be a really obvious one, is try to bring back the joy. So as I was talking about before, what I did, where it became part of my routine and my morning ritual, this is how I have my coffee, and I put an audiobook in. Some people do podcasts, some people put YouTube videos on and watch them whilst they're doing things. Anything that brings back the joy to you, getting rid of some of the plants that don't bring you joy and just cause you stress. Just because plant influencers I was talking about before, just because everybody's growing succulents, cacti, ferns, aroids, anthuriums, doesn't mean that you need to do the same or that it works for your stress levels. So adjust that and kind of find something that will bring back the joy, essentially, to you caring for all of your plants. And this comes along with the kind of notion of accepting loss. Sometimes you're going to lose plants. It's fine. Do not beat yourself up. Let go of that protection that you're feeling. And I know, it's quite easy to kind of go, but I said that I was going to take care of it for the rest of its life, and that's fine. You did your best. You can only ask yourself to do your best. It's not a failure if you can't do it. It just means that that plant wasn't meant for you. I can't sugarcoat that, but it's like, I like the notion of ferns, but I cannot keep them happy. So they're not for me. Same thing with some of the calatheas. So the same that I've managed to keep some calatheas happy, but I'm trying to think of other plants that have kind of like, an example was the begonia bipinnatifida that I really wanted, the one that's kind of got, it looks a bit like seaweed, very, very fine and delicate. I bought one, didn't work for me. I bought a second one. If that doesn't work for me, the way that I look at it is I haven't failed. It just can't, for me, based on my conditions, my care, all these things, I cannot deal with having that plant when other people can do great things with that plant. It's fine. We're not all the same. It would be incredibly dull if we were. And I can give you some more examples from my own personal burnout. As I said, if you're comfortable sharing some of your stories down below, please do. I think that the people that might be experiencing something similar will probably find that quite useful if you're comfortable to share. Not everybody will, and that's completely fine. But I'll give you some examples. Like for me, it's very overwhelming, leading towards burnout in the summer, because I've talked about this too many times. It takes way too long to water this and deal with the garden and deal with the allotment, because all those things compound over the summer, and have a job and do the filming and do all of these things. Most of the time in the summer, and I've spoken about this before, I got 2 hours off on a Sunday afternoon where I could just lie on the couch and do nothing. but the rest of the time I'm working one way or another. And it starts feeling like work, when in the winter it really, really doesn't. But what things have I adjusted? So I've taken stock on the things that I enjoy. So I enjoy growing my houseplants. And I was enjoying growing seedlings to then put into my allotment for vegetables, or kind of like decorative blooms in the garden and all these things. And that is the cheaper option. And I am fortunate enough that I don't have to go with the cheaper option. So guess what I'm not doing as much of this year? I'm doing some seed starting for things that are very specific that I can't find anywhere else. But instead of starting like thousands of seeds every like spring kind of coming into the summer, or kind of now really, from February to about May, I won't do all of that. And what I will do, and I know a lot of people snob this out, and I get a lot of like side-eye like views from a lot of the old cronies at the allotment, because they're just like, you're not doing this properly. And I'm just like, I'm doing this fine for me. Stay in your corner, no judging. Is just getting seedlings from garden centres, plant stores, all of these things. Things that have already started. Yes, they're going to be more expensive than potentially you doing that, but at the same time, I mean, the price difference isn't huge, okay? A seed packet, which could last you years, granted, is probably going to be like between 2, 5, 6, 7 pounds, Great British pounds. And 6, 9, 12 ready started seedlings might cost you the same as that packet of seeds, which will go for years. But guess what? I've not had to do anything. I can just put them in the ground and it's fine. And it then means there's one less thing for me to do, which helps with overwhelm. So that's a very specific example there. As I said, share some of your examples down below. I think some people might find it quite useful. But yeah, let's wrap up this potentially heavy topic. And I know a lot of people avoid kind of doing topics like this because it's heavy. We all know full well that we're going to do a video like this. People probably won't watch this all the way to the end because it's a bit bleak and depressing. Hopefully some people have done. Or they just won't watch it all together. And that's completely fine. Like, there is something about self-preservation, if that makes sense, even if it's like denial. It's not just a river in Egypt. It's like, I don't want to deal with that because I think I'm teetering on the edge, and that's fine as well, no judgment. But it's something that we need to kind of remember that we did this for fun. And I am going to be the one person, probably a few other maybe might say something similar, is if it doesn't bring you joy anymore, the whole thing, let it go. You can come back to it in the future if you ever feel like it, or not. That's completely fine. We all go through different phases of our lives. This might have just been a phase for you. There's other people that might want to be doing this for long term, and they're starting to feel that burnout, but they're just like, but I kind of foresee myself being an old man or an old lady sitting there and caring for my plants, and that's fine. Reduce a bit. Bring down some of that pressure now. You could be that crazy old man, crazy old woman with like thousands of plants, and you live in a jungle when you're old and retired, and that is absolutely fine. But that's still a process for you to get there. And also at that point, you don't have to deal with your family, you don't have to deal with work, you have got all of the free time. I am fully intending to be that crazy old man. I'm just saying this now. And apparently, I think I remember reading this, there was an article somewhere about this, where to stave off dementia, I've got one side of my family, there's a lot of dementia and Alzheimer's there, so I kind of know that it might happen to me. But so I'm very interested in reading articles about how you can stave that off or delay it as much as possible. One of the things that they say is that people that tend to their gardens or their plants, maybe not their plants in the house, but in the garden, this makes sense, tend to live for a bit longer because they've got something to live for, and it also keeps their brain engaged. Because if you're gardening, yes, winter comes and you don't do anything heavy in the garden, but guess what every gardener looks forward to? The spring. And they plan for the spring, and they've got something to look forward to. Same thing, same article was saying if you want to stave off some of the dementia, is even if you don't need to work, even if you're retired and you're very kind of old and frail, as long as you can kind of do this, find a job. Find a part-time job. Even if they'll take you doing a day each week, even if the pay isn't going to be the reason why you're doing this, having that to look forward to, that I need to go to work, and I get to use my brain for that one day will help stave things off. Whether or not people will do that is a different story altogether. But yeah, as with anything else, measure is key. Adjust if you're feeling overwhelmed, or let it go and come back to it later, or let it go and don't come back to it later. No judgment. But this is something that I think a lot more people need to kind of be aware of, because you can maybe catch it before it gets to that level, especially if it's something that you want to continue doing long term. Yeah. Hopefully I haven't depressed you too much. But you know me, I like to have the difficult conversations as well as the light and fluffy conversations. But yes, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.